Hello, everybody who's joining the stream. You're probably joining because you want to know price predictions on Bitcoin. You probably heard we're going to be talking about some Ethereum and some Litecoin movements. And we have Ty here who is going to show us just kind of like how he reads charts if you're interested in doing this yourself. Everybody has different ways, they have different platforms, and they have different, methods and like readers that they use. But today, we are going to start it off with some wonderful news as to why Bitcoin is actually so valuable. So first things first, let me share my screen. Actually, Ty, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Ty. I'm the CEO of Homo Hunt. We are building products for the future.
Is he trashy?
Oh. Am I good?
You're better now, yeah.
It's better now. You're good.
We're gonna be launching this month. Check us out, FOMOHunt.com. That's me.
And if you don't know, which you probably already know, I'm Eryka Gemma, CEO of the Blockchain Center, powered by the Bitcoin Center Miami. And we are focused on bringing education to you guys, technical education, trading education, basic education. But really, the goal is to bring mass adoption to the masses. Definitely, sometimes I'm like, why do we care about these people who don't care about the money system? But we should, because Bitcoin is a peaceful exit from a corrupt financial system that benefits everyone. So, Matt, if you want to introduce yourself, everyone knows you though.
What's up, guys? Just your resident toxic Bitcoin maximalist back for another beautiful Trading Tuesday. Glad to be back. Thank you guys for joining the show. Appreciate that.
So first things first, we are going to get into some news, just recent news, what makes Bitcoin valuable. And then Ty is going to get into the macro of Bitcoin, some insight from the last halving, Ethereum, Litecoin movement, and can we suspect an alt season? So please feel free to like this video. Please actually like this video. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed to our channel. We do this every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. And like it because it helps, and YouTube needs to recognize that algorithm. So to get started, let me share my screen real fast because this is very important talking about modern times. Woo! We have Jorge in the back. It's a peanut gallery. Why pay taxes when you can just print money? This is a very, very good point to make. There's ways you can peacefully exit the system. And I don't know, the income tax created the same year the Federal Reserve was created, just in case you didn't know that. So Ty, you want to talk about some recent news that makes this meme very, very significant?
Sure. So for those who have not heard, the Fed is now going to be buying individual corporate bonds. So what this means is the Fed is now going to be dipping their toes into, and they've already been doing this with, exchange traded funds, which are basically, mutual funds traded on stock exchange. But they're going to be essentially picking the winners and losers by funding them through buying individual corporate bonds, which is basically just debt by these companies. So they can raise money this way. And obviously, if the Fed is, deciding, who wins and who loses, then, whatever you had left of the free market is pretty much gone. So I actually, I made a tweet the other day saying that the crypto market seems to be the last remnant of free markets now that the Fed has pretty much dipped their toes into everything. Every market that exists, Forex, obviously the public markets, the private markets. Crypto is really the only thing left that hasn't necessarily been touched.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Like, that means that we're not operating in capitalism. I mean, we already know we're not operating capitalism because there are so many barriers to entry for businesses to start. So, there's just too much. It's crony capitalism, really. There's too much interference by the government. So we're not operating capitalism. Capitalism is, an imperfect way to run a government, but it's still probably the best thing we have. Yeah, but definitely what's happening now is that the Federal Reserve is buying stocks directly. So when you see, and what's interesting is that they're buying them from what do they say? They created a new entity that says that if a stock's rating is at a certain level, then they will purchase that stock, which that means that they're only going to be supporting big businesses, companies that are already profitable, companies that have already met some criteria that we don't know what that criteria is. It's not supporting your mom and pop shop. It's not supporting all of the small businesses. It's supporting publicly traded companies. And so when you see 40 million people, which is probably way more than 40 million people on unemployment, and then you also see that March was the best growth in stocks, and we're seeing these crazy wild swings, I mean, it's because there's interference. There's definitely foul play on the back end. You see, I think, Matt, you showed me a video earlier about how it's just basically corporate buybacks. These corporations are getting money, and all they're doing is buying their own stock to raise their price. And that's probably run out. And now they're just saying, all right, Fed, buy my stocks so our price will continue to rise.
And that's the crazy thing. I mean, even before like the Corona crash, and even before the Fed, started printing 125 billion a day, the biggest buyers of these equities, it was already the corporations.
Mm-hmm.
So now, I mean, the Fed has just absolutely, completely taken over the market. Whatever free market was left, I don't even know if it's there anymore. Honestly, it's basically the Fed market now.
Yep, long gone.
Long gone. But I mean, that brings us to Bitcoin, right? I mean, no matter how much the Fed wants to intervene and get their hands and meddle, there's just no way that they can alter the code, right? We know there's only going to be 21 million. Bitcoin's ever mined. We know exactly what the issuance rate is. We know that every 4 years the issuance rate gets cut in half. So, good luck with that, J-Pal. There's really no way you can mess with this. That was Satoshi's plan from the beginning. So we're blessed, really, to have an alternative. But a lot of people don't even know there's an alternative out there. So that's what we're here to do, is educate the masses and let people know there's another way.
Exactly. And also, too, it's like the last block that was mined before the halving, there was a message in that block. And the message was, what was it? I think a 2.3 trillion stimulus, which completely obliterates the stimulus that happened in 2008. So, Yep, things are changing, guys.
Yes, they are. And no matter how many, even if they do dip their toes into Bitcoin, they're not going to be able to print off any more. So if they want to, raise the value of Bitcoin, be my guest.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's funny you bring that up, because I've seen that popping up a lot more. It's like, if the Fed is printing all this money, why isn't the price of Bitcoin also being inflated as well? But then, hyperinflation, it's not really instant. It's going to take a while to feel the effects of exactly what the Fed is doing. So it's going to take at least months, if not years, to really feel the impact of what they're doing.
Right. And we just had the halving. So what that does is, and we talked about this, I think, the last week, the Bitcoin halving essentially takes miners' profits, from a level that they're used to, right, for 4 years, really. And it instantly cuts that in half. And so for miners, they're having to, survive, keep their mining operations afloat by selling a little bit at a time. So you might not see the impact of the supply and demand, shortage until a later time, which, is going to coincide with all this hyperinflation that we have going on. So it's going to be big when it does happen.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just a matter of when, but that's the $1 billion question. No one can really predict when it's going to happen. So, I mean, all we really can do is take the, best educated steps that we can take today to prepare for the future. So that's really what Bitcoin's all about.
Very true.
Awesome. So, Ty, do you want to jump into some of the chart magic and
some BTC Macro?
Yes. And let me know if I'm lagging a little bit. I don't know. My internet is sometimes good and sometimes bad.
Oh my gosh, wait, Ty, I forgot. We need to talk about that DDoS attack yesterday. I know a lot. I mean, I personally wasn't affected by it, but what was that? Like, what happened? Oh, by the way, for those of you guys that don't know, there was a denial of service attack which was coming from somewhere, but a lot of people's cell phone service got shut down. I think AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, Comcast, like you name the big carriers, they all got attacked. So like, what was that, Ty?
So it was an interesting story that developed. So the initial thoughts were from everyone that it was a DDoS attack, and I think it still possibly was. But basically what developed was T-Mobile was the source of this problem. So T-Mobile was merging with Sprint, and they have different bands. And so and there's a lot of different carriers that are underneath T-Mobile. There's like Metro PCS, and there's other carriers that are underneath Sprint and T-Mobile. So all those carriers are going to be affected because there are two main bands that were basically taken down. And so when T-Mobile attempted to do this merge, something went wrong. And some people believe that there was a DDoS attack, at the same time, and just maybe to cause havoc. I don't know, maybe to we can't really say what the reasons were. We do know that there were, in fact, DDoS attacks from multiple sites that showed, like FortiGuard. I think there was Horizon as well was showing the same thing. So we did see that there were attacks. And this, for those who don't know, like a DDoS attack is a distributed denial of service attack. So it just means that from obfuscated networks around the world, they can essentially attack a singular point of failure with what are called shells, and these shells are basically just requests. So it's like if I click the reload button a million times on my browser for a website, to reload a page, that's a request, and so that's basically happening on a large scale with a lot of computing power, and that's essentially what was happening yesterday, and a lot of people who experienced the issue, like for instance, I think there's some Verizon people who actually experienced the issue as well. I was trying to figure out, trying to narrow down what carriers were actually having the issue, because it could have just been for instance, if somebody called a T-Mobile phone and they couldn't get through, or if somebody called from a T-Mobile phone to a Verizon phone and they couldn't get through, and they said, "Oh, your service is not working." But I did get a couple of Verizon people and some AT&T people as well. So it seemed to be multiple carriers. But the story ended up being something along the lines of a network issue with the integration. So that might be the actual story. It might not be, because we haven't heard anything else. So
yeah, that's wild. Okay, sorry. You just needed to talk about that, guys, because all technology is really great, but we are very dependent on it. And only imagine if that actually happened and your cell phones went down for a while, we would be screwed. So yeah. Plus Sprint, thank you, proof of work, whoever you are. T-Mobile and Sprint making a monopoly. We need some antitrust laws. Just kidding. I don't like laws. All right. Moving on to BTC Macro. Go ahead, Ty.
All right, cool. Well, let me go ahead and pull up my screen. All right. Okay. Let me know when you guys can see.
Got you. I can see it.
All right, cool. So I got a lot going on here, and I'm going to explain everything that's going on in this whole chart here. So this is actually the Brave New Coin Liquid Index. So the reason I picked this up instead of a BTC chart to USD on Coinbase or something like that is because this gives us a much bigger price history for Bitcoin. It actually goes back almost, I think, to 2009 when the Genesis block was first created. So it gives us more price history, and this is in logarithmic numbers. So this will let us see kind of the numbers closer together. That way that, if I turn off log, then it just doesn't look right at all. It doesn't let us see the entire equation, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I want to point to is the second Bitcoin halving, which occurred on July. I want to say it was, I can't remember exactly what day in July, but this is as close as we can get to the actual day in July when the halving happened in 2016. So what we can see here is we can see a similar trend playing out with these wedges. This black line here and the black line here. This kind of forms a wedge. Now, it's not a perfect wedge for the second halving. It's much easier to see in the third halving here. But what I do want to point out is that, and actually I need to rewind here. Let's see. I want to take this back a second here, and you can actually replay. This is cool. You can replay some of the time that occurred on the chart. So I'm just replaying this so I can show you this later. But essentially what we have here is we have the halving, and then 280 days from the initial halving. This is the second halving. This is when the price finally eclipses the previous all-time high, and I believe that was around $1,170, and then so once it eclipses that, it pretty much goes on the next bull run all the way to almost 20,000. Mm-hmm. So the reason that's important is because that gives us an idea, and this also goes back to the kind of the stock to flow model. It gives us an idea of like how much time needs to take place from the halvings for the supply and demand shock to kind of to rein in. So this green area, this little green line here, shows us exactly when the eclipse or the price was eclipsed for the last all-time high. So then we can take a look at the second piece here, and we can kind of do the same thing. So this is our halving for the third halving, which was in May. I think it was May 11th for the last halving that we just had. And then what I've done is I have taken what's called I think it's like a bar chart. It's like a replica of a previous instance of price history for this little area here. I think I took that exactly from this moment after the second halving. So basically, I've copied the second halving price history over to the third halving to give us an idea of what it might look like if it were to copy the second halving or the after the second halving's price history. And this is what it looks like, and it's almost identical to the last instance here between the second halving and this little green line here. So it basically, I mean, it's pretty similar. Now, this doesn't have to happen exactly the way that it's shown here. It could happen before that. It could happen later, depending on certain scenarios. But it just gives us an idea of what things might look like. And this is 280 days out from the halving, and that 280 days puts us at February of 2021. Of at least getting close to eclipsing that previous all-time high. Now,
that's going to happen. I already had predictions, by the way, just saying, because it's my birthday month.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very high possibility. One of our team members, Cal, actually wrote about it right around the halving for our Bitcoin halving article. And he pointed out the same thing. The same thing that I'm telling you guys, he actually came to his own conclusion on his own. And so he pointed out the same thing. And I think it's a very common thing to look at because, the halving history gives us an idea of not necessarily when people are going to be buying, but more so when the demand shock is going to set in, mm-hmm. or the supply shock. So I'm thinking February 2021, and that kind of gives us a way to look at the rest of the charts here. And I'm going to show you, now that I've removed that, I want to play this forward just to see how it's played out so far from the halving. I mean, you can see it's not, it's kind of neutral so far. Mm-hmm. So it's not exactly, playing out exactly like we thought it would. But I mean, it could shoot off at any point, and it doesn't have to follow this wedge at all. It could go down, obviously, bounce off the bottom here. I think it's highly unlikely, just because of all the things that are going on right now. Of course, you got with the Fed and with Bitcoin getting more and more scarce. I just think that it's likely that we trade sideways for a little bit, jump on top of this trend line here and then go up from there to, and like I said, it could totally beat this 2021 February estimate and just shoot off from there. But that's just a guess. So.
Okay,
Right.
so you're saying in summary, February 2021, people can send me Bitcoin because Bitcoin will be at its new above 20K price.
That's the good estimate here. That's what the halving says.
And I mean, we know that the effects of the halving aren't instant, right? It's not like May 11th, 12:01, right after midnight, and then the price instantly goes to 100K. When you study the past few halvings, I mean, give or take, it seems like the run comes about, 6 to 18 months after the halving. So I agree. Yep. I mean, we could definitely just be chilling sideways for quite some time. I mean, we've kind of just been chilling in the 9K range for quite a while now. So I
certainly think that we're going to at least get to, somewhere between like 13 to 14K. Definitely before the end of the year. I don't know. I just have a strong feeling. So I believe that we'll end up being on top of this trend line here and invalidate it. And then from there, there's just no telling. I mean, you could have, an instant supply shock and people go wild for Bitcoin. If they keep printing off money, that's another thing. So, we're looking at like trillions of dollars being printed off. Whereas the last stimulus packages back in like 2008, like Eryka was mentioning, weren't anywhere close to this. So could be a totally different story.
What they're doing now, it makes 2007, 2008 look like Candyland almost.
Yeah.
But then you think about like how the cost of money has lessened. So in relationship, is it really that much more money? I don't know.
That's true. I mean, that's true. That's a good point. And, Bitcoin itself has never really had to go through something like this. I mean, JP Morgan, not that people sure care what they say anyways, but they came out and said that the Bitcoin had survived its first stress test. So, I don't really care what they say regardless. But, if you're a stocks person, if you, value what these execs say, then that should be a nice message for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just funny to see Jamie Dimon there do the complete 180 from.
Oh, of course.
Trash talking Bitcoin for years, and then all of a sudden, maybe we should take it seriously because, we know what happened with the COVID dump. Bitcoin lost half of its value in hours, and it's like it never happened. We've completely recovered from that. I mean, we're back to 9.5. So
yeah, I don't know what that instance was. We call it Black Thursday now, which will always be a memory in my heart. I remember everybody's freaking out. People were messaging me like, "Oh man, I'm so scared right now." And I'm just like, just hodl. Don't let go of your Bitcoin. So
buy the dip.
You don't lose it. Like, you don't take a loss unless you sell. So
right.
It's not a loss.
Right.
People. Yeah, but no, Jamie Dimon's definitely a hypocrite. There's like pictures of him kneeling for Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, dude, you realize that the money you steal from impoverished communities more than anything. So go screw yourself. Like, you're such a hypocrite.
They know.
I mean, those are the real looters, right? It's the bankers are the real looters. The Fed is the real looters. Yeah,
it's the $2 trillion they approved in the last 90 days. $2 trillion. And to put this into perspective, Johnny Dollar was here, and I read this, but I didn't hear it, so it really stuck with me when Johnny said it. But if you were to count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 1 trillion, it would take you 1,000 years, right? So to think that the last time I was in Miami, which about a month ago, we hit $25 trillion. I remember the day. And then when I came back here, we hit $26 trillion in a month. So yeah.
All the crypto.com ads are so out of date because I think it's 22 trillion. They're like $4 trillion behind.
For sure.
That's crazy. Yeah, well, I think we're definitely going to see a massive intrigue, and I think people are going to have to start. You're going to have to start figuring out, and like some of these protests, I was seeing videos of people talking about, Bitcoin, talking about talking about the Fed. And so I think people are going to have to start figuring out that you need better money. And there's only one place to get that. So.
Yeah, and I think people are, thankfully slowly starting to wake up, but if we could help give them a little push, help them wake up a little faster, it'll just help everyone out.
Yep, I agree. So now what we're looking at here, this is Ethereum. This is on the 1 day on Kraken. So this is Ethereum to the US dollar. So
just a real recap. Last week, Ty advised, well, not advised because this is not financial advice, but said that, it's a good idea to be looking at Ethereum, looking at Litecoin, looking at these smaller cap coins that actually do have value, just because we all know when Bitcoin price rises, like a tide raises all ships. Because something is operating with a smaller cap or a smaller denominator, movements will gain quicker, and also drops will happen faster. But if we think that the market is gaining, it might be a good idea to just diversify into some of these assets. Not that they follow sound money principles, but from a purely financial perspective.
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing to remember is that Bitcoin is sort of like the funding mechanism for a lot of these altcoins. So as the price of Bitcoin continues to gain, a lot of those profits are going to be taken and then just chipped off and put into a bunch of different altcoins. Now, the top two altcoins are going to be Ethereum and Litecoin, and for good reason. And we can talk more about the fundamentals behind that later on if you want. But as far as the technical analysis reason here, they follow Bitcoin very closely. So, and I'll show you why that's going to matter, and what you should expect in the same time frame, because we just looked at February 2021. That should be like a relative time frame that we can expect Bitcoin to eclipse its all-time high. For Ethereum, it might be a little bit different. It may not actually eclipse its all-time high, but it'll do something similar. And for Ethereum and Litecoin, it's going to shoot off a lot faster, just because, like you said, there's a smaller market cap and it's going to be much more volatile, which is good and bad, but good right now because the price is so low, and it will be valuable, and it is valuable in the future. So what we have here is we have this red line here, which is a major point of resistance. This is around 290 US dollars. You could round up to 300 if you wanted to, but right around that price range is a big resistance. And it actually was, you can see back here in this price history, this is back in 2017 when the last bull run began, and you can see it kind of tiered between the top and the bottom of this red line here. So $300 around there is a pretty crucial psychological resistance. And as soon as it really popped off, it started to use it as support. And as soon as it confirmed that support, that's when it took the next leg to around, this says $1,600 almost. So it's pretty important that we get past this psychological resistance, and it'll be a little bit different for Ethereum as far as eclipsing its all-time high, because again, volatility, market cap, all that stuff. So what I see happening is I see this green range here. This is between, I believe, 135 US dollars and 252. I think what's going to happen is we're going to stay in this range and just kind of trade up and down in this range for a while. Or we could just kind of trend following this trend line here. Now, this trend line is probably going to be invalidated just because there's not a whole lot of analysis here. I mean, you only have 1 point here, 1 point here, and then there's nothing else to show for that we can see. In some other instances, you could simply, if you wanted to, you could draw one here and say, oh, there's a trend line there. But again, we don't really have a lot of price history on this one. So it's more likely that what will happen is it'll just trade sideways until February 2021. But for this instance, this is a replication of an earlier price history that kind of shows us what it might look like if it followed the trend line here, dipping just below the range here and then bouncing all the way up to the $300 price resistance zone. After that, after $300, if we see major support, if it holds on support at $300, at that point you can pretty much say goodbye to 1,500 and maybe 2,000 to 3,000, because when Ethereum does go off, it's going to go off. And that's my personal opinion. I think that it's highly undervalued. And there's a lot of good reasons. Like, we can talk about that later if you want.
No, do you want to mention some of those reasons now?
Well, sure. So, I mean, one of the main reasons is because the entire decentralized finance ecosystem is being built around Ethereum. And I think one of the easiest or one of the biggest reasons why is because of the ease of access for Ethereum developers. So, and I think there's a lot more people that could talk more on the actual development side of things. And like Hashoshi, he's on Twitter and YouTube, really cool guy. He's I think he actually works with Solidity. But it's super easy to develop on. So if you wanted to get started on Ethereum and get into the DeFi ecosystem, not only is there a lot of easy tools to use with Solidity, but there's also a lot of interesting and a lot of money in the ecosystem, like MakerDAO. There's a lot of tokenized assets on the Ethereum blockchain as well. And there's a lot on Bitcoin as well. So you could really go either way, but if you want to, give value to Ethereum, then that's a couple of reasons. Ethereum 2.0 may come, it may not. If it does ever come, then I mean, you can expect a much greater pump. But even if it doesn't, there's still a lot of value in it. And I'll try to think of a couple other reasons why, but I think mainly it's a lot of, and here's another thing. The Bank of France recently issued 80 million euros in bonds on the Ethereum blockchain.
That's incredible. Yeah,
yep.
I think Ethereum has definitely, established itself that it's going to be around for the long run. I mean, you guys know that we love Bitcoin around here, but we're not going to tell people to not diversify into Ethereum and Litecoin as well. And, as far as other altcoins and cryptos go, I'd even go as far to say Ethereum and Litecoin are the best altcoins out there. So it really doesn't hurt to have, some BTC, some Ethereum, some Litecoin as well. Those are kind of the three that have been around, and they're going to continue to be around.
Agreed.
And what's important is that, we know that Bitcoin is sound money. It is sound monetary principles written into code so everyone can verify that it continues to be sound over time. Now, Ethereum is very much a developer tool. This is why you're seeing the DeFi movement. This is why you're seeing ERC 721 tradable tokens and crypto and just like all of these different platforms that Bitcoin necessarily doesn't even want to have running on them, right? So Ethereum definitely is something that I don't really look at Bitcoin as like stocks, but I do look at the coins on other public blockchains like Bitcoin and like Ethereum and Litecoin as the stock, right? The value in it is the value of the network. And as that network grows, as more people use these tools, especially developers, and especially Solidity is not that hard of a language from what I know, we're going to see it used more often, used in official government stuff like in the Bank of France, and it's just going to grow. So I definitely would not be opposed to people holding ETH, although this is not financial advice. Say it again.
Yeah. Yes. And what I would also add on to that is, so Bitcoin is great for the foundation. I would say it's great for the foundation of money in general. I would not, right now, I would not ever want to issue out tokens on the Bitcoin blockchain, just because of the time frame that it has to go through the proof of work process. So it wouldn't necessarily make sense to do that. That's why Ethereum works better in that aspect. And it's kind of like, you have different tools for different purposes, and Bitcoin's purpose is not for what Ethereum is being used for. Bitcoin's more like if you want to, build an off-chain, like network, like Liquid or Lightning Network, for example, that eventually confirms the transactions on-chain to have more security and reliability, then that's what it's good for. But it's not necessarily good for, the Ethereum issuing out tokens and creating your own NFTs and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. You're going to use whatever tool you need for that purpose, for that end goal. You're not going to use a watering can to dig a hole. You're going to use a shovel. That's
right.
why we use Ethereum, to issue these tokens. But Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, that's a solid base, a solid foundation. You want to go, chasing altcoins, we can do another Trading Tuesday on that. But for now, we're just focused on, the big boys, the power players, the fundamentals, really, the pillars of crypto.
Right. And this leads us into our next ones. We got Litecoin here. And again, we could talk about, some of the fundamentals afterwards. And this one is, this chart's a little interesting, and this might get people hyped up because of what I have at the end here. So what we have here at the beginning, August 2015 was the first Litecoin halving. I believe, I'm trying to remember the exact year Litecoin was first launched. Do you guys know by any chance? 2012 or 2013?
Is it?
I say 13.
2012 or 13. I could look it up real quick.
Or maybe it's 2011. I can't remember. Either way, the first halving was 2015. And so there's not a whole lot of price history on Litecoin, simply because it is so young. It's not, it happened, or it was made a little bit after Bitcoin. So it doesn't have, the 11-year price history that Bitcoin does. But, nonetheless, we do have, that it was existing during Bitcoin's last bull run. So it kind of gives us an idea of how it reacts with Bitcoin. And we'll talk about, more about why fundamentally it might react like that. But from August 2015, which was its first halving, all the way until really, if you get closer here, you can see like it trades in a range here in the green area until finally on March 30th, 2017, it just explodes. And I think it goes from, it really doesn't stop. It doesn't really stop anywhere for a while. And it pretty much just goes all the way to $360, which I ended up buying at like $270 back in November of 2017 or something like that, which was fun. I kind of bought at the top, but that's another story. But so it took about 600 days from the first Litecoin halving all the way until the bull run, the first bull run really for Litecoin. And this mainly happened because of Bitcoin's price movement. But I just wanted to show you guys, what kind of price movement does happen when Bitcoin moves. So you can see here, this says 8,485%. And that is the percentage gain that it had from all the way down from here for like $4.14, which it kind of traded in this range for a while, all the way until $360, $670, somewhere around there. So that's a big price gap, big potential for profits. So that's the first thing. And then so the most recent Litecoin halving was also in August 2019. And so this is right here at this point. You can see it doesn't really have a whole lot of movement afterwards, but it does have a lot of price movement before. And I think that's kind of similar to what we had in this last halving back in 2015. But regardless, again, it's going to move with Bitcoin regardless, so that doesn't matter as much. It does get more scarce because Litecoin operates similarly to Bitcoin with its halving. So it's going to have a supply shock at some point. It hasn't happened yet because, again, it moves with Bitcoin. But if we were to take that halving day, which was, again, in August of 2019, and fast forward all the way to around February 2021, which is, again, that same time frame that we looked at with the Bitcoin halving time frame, that would put us at 553 days. So about 50 days short from our last halving to bull run. So it's pretty close. It's close enough. And so it'll probably trade in this range for some time. It may revisit $26, $25 for a third time just to retest support. And then from there, I think it'll bounce. And the big price resistance is probably around $65. But the big thing here is what happens afterwards. Because so what I've done is I've taken a replication of the same chart data here that we had all the way from $4 to 370, and I've overlaid it here on the next chart. And if we do the same thing, same percentage gain, then we would be somewhere around $3,759 from the end of this little triangle here. And now it's probably more than what it'll end up being. And it maybe not, maybe not. Maybe it ends up being around there. But I estimate that it's probably going to be somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000. And let's just say that we take let's say we take half of this 8,485% gain here, just to give you an idea from the bottom of this triangle here or top. Let's say we take half of that. Yeah, I mean, you're still going to be at like $1,800. So if you're holding Litecoin and you have even a couple of Litecoin, which I think most people do, and it goes to around $1,400 or $1,800, it's pretty good gains. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely solid. So we were actually all wrong. Litecoin was October 2011.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, a lot of people think Litecoin was actually the first altcoin. Namecoin was the first altcoin, and that was launched in April of 2011. So even though Litecoin is not the first altcoin, it's one of the earliest, one of the first ever altcoins to ever exist, launching, only a few months after the first ever altcoin. So just a fun little Litecoin fact for the Charlie Lee fans.
Yeah, and real quick, Ty, you said something last time about Litecoin being like silver to Bitcoin's gold, and I've heard that before, but I never really understood it. So do you want to explain a little bit?
Sure. So it's basically, it follows similar rules to Bitcoin, and it was one of the reasons why a lot of people really liked Litecoin, because it has similar halving rules. So I can't remember exactly what the halving rules are, but every 4 years, as it indicated from the last halving here in 2015 to 2019, it cuts its supply in half, just like Bitcoin does. It has a max supply. I want to say it's 80 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, for Litecoin's max supply.
I'll pull it up for you. I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
I can't remember. I did.
As long as they have a max, like a limited supply, that's really what matters. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so. Oh, go ahead.
84 million. Very close.
Oh, very close. Okay. So 84 million. So it does have a max supply, and I think one of the most important things in cryptocurrency and really just money in general is that you have a max supply. And so Charlie Lee, the creator of Litecoin, wanted to make sure that it follows similar rules. And so this is probably the closest you're going to get to like a mini Bitcoin. And that's why people say that it is the silver to Bitcoin's gold. So like again, so max supply has deflationary characteristics. I mean, I really don't think you can get much more different from Bitcoin other than the fact that the creator is known, of course, Charlie Lee. But that's, there aren't a whole lot of things different. And the other thing with Litecoin is that it is in fact faster. So, if you can be a Bitcoin maximalist, and I sometimes like to do that, but you have to, realize that Litecoin is in fact faster. And if you wanted to use it, on a straight transaction, it's going to be a much faster transaction than it would be using Bitcoin. And that's just facts. So
straight facts, absolute facts. But yeah, I kind of do like that analogy, likening it to the silver to Bitcoin's gold. I think it kind of works pretty well.
Yeah,
and
people coming from a more traditional sense can kind of understand that, if they're kind of new to crypto.
Right.
Now, I think the last thing we were going to talk about was crypto market cap moving average and then alt season. We do have a question, though, asking about our take on Zcash's fundamentals. So let's do like maybe alt season first and then.
Yeah. I have a little knowledge on Zcash fundamentals. I know about ZK snarks and then some of that. And of course, you have Monero and whatnot. So I guess, we could probably dive into that. So yeah, the first thing though is the total crypto market cap. And if you wanted to find out, what this price chart looks like, you could go to TradingView. If you just type in total, it's like one of the first things that pops up. So what we want to do is I want to go to a more macro view and look at the weekly because I want to see what our moving averages tell us here, and then what this kind of coiling of the market cap means for us. So the first thing is this blue moving average. And by the way, for those who don't know like what a moving average is, it's just the moving average of price history on whatever time frame you're using. So for instance, I'm using the weekly. So for each weekly candle close, it takes that price history and it takes the moving average of that price history, of the closing price history. So it just basically shows us on a chart, and it's a lagging indicator, by the way, because it has to accumulate for price history, like previous price history. So it's not going to give you instant results, but it is going to help you understand like where are things going, even though the price history is kind of up and down. So the first thing is the 50 MA is this little blue line here. So this is going to be our more reactive moving average. And then the second line here is the orange line, which is our less reactive moving average. That's 100 week and 50 week moving average. So what we can actually see from this, and I want to see how far this price history goes. Yeah, it goes decently far. It doesn't go as far back just because, again, it's a lagging price or indicator. But essentially what you can see is that anytime the 50 crosses from below the 100 MA, that is a good sign. So for instance, what we have here. So this 50 MA here crosses over the 100 MA to the upside. So not to the downside. So like for instance here, this would be a bearish scenario because the 50 MA is crossing over the 100 to the downside. So we knew that because obviously, I mean, look, by then, if you saw this, this indicator, you'd already be down 84%. So I think you would know by then that the situation was bearish. But in times of, I call it coiling, what you can see is the price is not moving as volatile as it does here. And it's because what's happening is it's reaching points of support and resistance, and it's going to get to a point where it has to make a decision. So it has to decide, okay, are we going to go down or are we going to go up? Now, if you're a crypto investor, obviously you believe the fundamentals of crypto in general would just make the crypto market cap go up. And of course, there's Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is included in this market cap. So with that being said, some of these altcoins start to experience volatility and high percentage gains and random points before Bitcoin actually blows up if Bitcoin is trading sideways. Just because, people are probably pumping in money to these little altcoins, trying to either, pump and dump or just maybe just people trying to get out of the regular markets. They already have enough Bitcoin. They're satisfied with that. And they just want to see if they can make some money trading, because obviously that's what cryptocurrency does well for people. But what we can see is that recently we actually did have a cross of the 50 MA over the 100. And that is probably more so because of this big pump that we had immediately after Black Thursday. And that put us right back where we started pretty much, which is just ridiculous. I don't think anybody can really pinpoint why the dump happened. I don't think the dump was even supposed to happen. I think it was supposed to trade sideways, but for whatever reason, it could be miners, it could have been something else that we didn't foresee. It did dump, and immediately after that, we went back up. So now that these moving averages are getting really close, what's probably going to happen is this blue moving average, the 50, is going to stay above the 100. And I imagine this is probably our indicator in a couple weeks, months, where I'm going to just trade sideways. But in this trading sideways motion, that is where the alt season essentially begins. This is where these 100 to 200, 300% gains are made on a lot of these altcoins. Some of them are already experiencing it. Like I think Dragon Chain was up like 300%. Just the other day I checked. I have some Dragon Chain, by the way, and I think it's a very good project, or company, I should say. And there's a lot of different companies here and there that are going to go up and down.
Yeah, I went to Seattle one time and I met the founders of Dragon Chain. So they were very nice people.
Have you ever met Joe, the CEO?
I think I did. I don't remember, honestly.
Yeah.
I was there for a different meeting, and then they were just like, "Oh, these are the people who founded Dragon Chain," and I was like, "Cool, Seattle tech scene, awesome." Chat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Joe's a cool guy. They're doing good work over there. But yeah, I mean, that's just one altcoin that's already experiencing some serious gains. And I don't think people realize, and people sometimes have different opinions of what an alt season is. Some people think, it's like 1,000%, gains here and there. I mean, you could, decide on that whether you want to or not. But what I think is going to happen is I think we're going to trade sideways in this market cap until finally, and then this is all season. This is what is considered all season. And then finally, when Bitcoin takes off, either before or, on February 2021, that is when real alt season takes off, because then a lot of like I said, a lot of those Bitcoin profits are just dumped into these altcoins, and then it's just then it's just crazy.
It's just crazy. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's almost kind of mirrors what's happening now with like the Dave Portnoy effect and like everyone rushing into Robinhood and like everybody trying to be a day trader. Like my boy who, like, this kid doesn't have a debit card, okay? Just said to me the other day, like, dude, tell me what stocks to buy. Like, I need to know what stock. Like, that's how you know, guys. We're at the local top here. Like,
yep.
The market can pump a little bit more, and I'm talking about the normie market, the traditional markets, but the alt season run up is kind of mirrors that like Robinhood rush where everyone just kind of like piles in all at once chasing those gains.
And you know what? I'm pretty sure that Robinhood got this idea of fractional reserve owning of stocks from Bitcoin, because I used to say that all the time. I used to be like, well, you can't buy parts of stocks. You have to dish out a full $800 to buy one stock of Apple, and you're not even holding it. But now it's like I can't even say that line anymore because
whatever. They took that one from us.
I know. So anything else on your list, Tyre? Do you want to talk about Zcash real fast before we move on to the last thing?
Yeah, actually, I don't have anything on TA for Zcash right now. I might be able to show.
You don't have to read TA. I was thinking he was asking just fundamentals in terms of like, let's see what his question is. Zcash fundamentals. So Zcash is a very interesting coin. If you guys don't know about it, it is a privacy coin. But what's interesting about Zcash is it is pseudo privacy and also you can choose your transaction if you want it to be viewable on the blockchain or if you don't. Now, private transactions are very important. Now, the reason why is because Bitcoin initially, the way that I view it is like the government should use Bitcoin so we can see where they're moving the money. And then the people should use Monero or Zcash or some privacy coin because they shouldn't be allowed to see where we're spending our money. Now, Bitcoin is pseudonymous and you do have to like really, really want to know a person's transaction, like what transactions they're making in order to go after them. Like you would have to invest money into finding that out more likely than not. But with things like Zcash, definitely like having the ability to send transactions without, like people who want privacy, it's not that they have something to hide, it's that they just like their privacy. So long term, Zcash and Monero definitely have a use case. I think you're going to see the use case grow. A lot of people who are anarchists kind of are like moving away from Bitcoin because they're like, oh, well, it's not private anymore. But I really don't see like the economic incentives and like for privacy to be that serious. I think people are generally pleased with the privacy that Bitcoin offers, especially if you buy it certain routes, you can't be traced. And you just really have to be careful on how you get your hands on it. But yeah, anything else you guys want to say about Zcash or Monero?
I mean, you seem to know a good bit about Zcash.
Private transactions. I use cash only.
I figured you would know about private transactions. So I would just add on to that. I think it's interesting that it was conceived by scientists at MIT and Johns Hopkins, who just so happens to be involved in a lot of like facial recognition, robotics, AI, a lot of privacy intrusive types of technology. So I just wanted to add that on there. I would go ahead.
Just real quick, yeah, I forgot too that ZK Snarks is the protocol they use.
Yes.
And Jamie Dimon, when he made his like Jamie Dimon coin, or what is it called, JP Morgan
JPM coin.
Yeah, it uses ZK Snarks. So.
Oh, that's funny.
I know.
And it was made off of with the original Bitcoin code base as well. So that is interesting.
Isn't every single altcoin made off of the Bitcoin code base?
Pretty much, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, that's the idea behind it.
Yeah.
I would say if I was going to hold a privacy coin, I would rather have Monero. You covered a lot of the fundamentals of Zcash. ZK Snarks, I think I couldn't tell you like a lot of the details on the protocol. I'm trying to remember exactly how Monero does
like ring technology. So basically it like wraps your transactions up by sending them like randomly.
Right.
I also was on a panel one time with some guy who like worked for the NSA and he was like, yeah, that's bullshit. He's like, I've broken Moneros before and I've broken Ethereum. And I'm like, all right, dude, whatever.
Yeah. Sometimes those guys can be, they can say, I'm a, next level 10 hacker,
Yeah.
It may or may not be true, but I mean, as far as Monero goes, I like the way the idea behind it. So if I'm trying to remember correctly, it only gives you a certain part of the hash of the transaction, if I remember correctly. And then the other person has to know what that is essentially in the transaction. And then it doesn't reveal the whole thing, but the only way for both for the transaction to actually go through, I think, is for the transaction to recognize this small portion of the transaction and then reveal the rest of it. So I think that works pretty well. I don't know much about ZK Snarks, to be honest, but I do like the way Monero works, and also the fact that it's forked off of Bitcoin. As far as its TA, I was just looking at it a second ago. It looks good. I think most altcoins will, but if you had to choose between Zcash and Monero, I might choose Monero.
Just for the TA, just from a TA perspective.
Probably TA and fundamental analysis. I think I've done a decent amount of research on Monero, and it seems to be the better option than Zcash. Didn't they change their name to like Zcoin or Electric Coin or something, like the electric company?
I think so, yeah. And one thing too that's really important to understand, especially when it comes to these new currencies, is that it really must involve a community. And Monero has definitely done a lot to build the community. They have like the Church of Monero, if you guys have ever seen it before. There was I've been to not that I've been to meetings, but I've seen Church of Monero meetings from far away. So
sure,
you've got to build the community. Super important.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know much about privacy coins, but the one thing I do know is that like the golden standards for privacy coin, it's going to be Monero, it's going to be Zcash, it's going to be one of the two. Drew loves Zcash. I don't know if that means anything. Our friend at the Blockchain Center, Drew Tang.
Oh, I love Drew Tang. He's a homie.
I don't know if it's backed by the CIA. I've heard that Zcash is possibly backed by the CIA. Do your own research. This is not financial advice, but yeah, I've heard interesting things about Zcash, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Highly likely, just from where it stems from.
MIT,
Johns Hopkins. That's suspicious.
Makes you think. Makes you question the origin. But anything you guys want to add in closing?
I'll have to think of anything. I mean, I guess you could add on the fact that Bitcoin hash rate. I think I saw an article. It's like up 13.4%, somewhere around there. So it's retracing to its previous all-time high. Right now, it's sitting at 113. What is that? 113 million terahashes, which is inconceivable for my head to imagine.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad you brought that up because the difficulty just adjusted, and I think it was one of the biggest increases since like 2016.
It might have been the difficulty that increased, not the hash rate, but yeah.
I mean, I think both are going up. The hash rate's going up and the difficulty's going up, which is great because everyone's kind of been screaming the minor capitulation after the halving, and we did see two pretty big drops in difficulty, but I think the adjustment that just happened a few hours ago, it was like plus 14 or plus 15%. So people are definitely piling back onto the network. So
Very cool.
I mean, fundamentally, that's extremely bullish.
Cool. All right.
True.
Well, any other comments, guys? I'm going to close this out.
I think we're good.
I was just going to promote the website, blockchaincenter.com/livestream, but go for it, Eryka.
No, you do it.
Yeah, if you guys are new, to the blockchain space, even if you've been around for a few years and you want to learn more, we have an awesome blockchain fundamentals course kicking off in less than a month. It starts July 14th, and the spaces are limited. So check out the link down below. It's blockchaincenter.com/livestream to learn more about that.
Yeah, and it's being taught by a professor of UC Berkeley. We partnered with like FinTech School and it's another place in Miami. Don't get mad because I remember. Oh, Miami EdTech. So definitely for anybody, and it might not be you, but for anyone that wants to learn about blockchain fundamentals, how to apply it to the current industry that you're working in. Greg LeBlanc, Professor LeBlanc, is a great teacher and very well renowned. Super awesome guy, tells stories about how he's connected with different heads of state in different countries. So really interesting. But anyways, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ty, for being a part of this wonderful Trading Tuesdays. I hope that I have Jorge over here. Anyways, I hope that you guys learned something, and I hope that if you have not bought Bitcoin, that you come to our website and that you will learn how to buy Bitcoin, because the financial revolution is happening with or without you, but it is a peaceful revolution. So don't worry, you don't need to expose yourself to Corona. All right. Bye, you guys. Thank you. Follow all of us on Twitter and XOXO Gossip Girl.
Thanks so much, guys. See you next week.
Bye.
Take it easy.